Hi, and welcome back to Be a Better Leader. I'm Dr. AJ Lee, a manager on our customer success team and learning implementation strategist at FranklinCovey, the world's most trusted leadership company. Today, we're going to explore how leaders can effectively lead their teams through change while maintaining high levels of trust and collaboration. Joining us to share some of his expertise and insights is New York Times and #1 Wall Street Journal bestselling author of The Speed of Trust, The One Thing That Changes Everything, and the newly released Trust and Inspire book, Stephen M.R. Covey. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Hi, AJ. It's so great to be with you. I always love it, and I'm excited for today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. So I'd love to just hear from you as we think about this topic and trust and collaboration. Let's start at a very high level. When we think about the changes that every leader listening here inevitably will navigate through during their career, whether they're going through it right now or they're anticipating a future change to come. In your opinion, why are trust and collaboration so crucial during a period of change?
Yes, I think it's a great question because you think about it. I think of the statement by Mahatma Gandhi where he said, the difference between what we are currently doing and what we are capable of doing would solve most of the world's problems. In other words, there's a gap between our performance and our potential. And if we can learn to work together effectively, to truly collaborate in a creative way, innovative way, we can close that gap. We can achieve greater performance that is more aligned with our potential because none of us is as smart as all of us, right? And
Right.
so we got to collaborate. And the key to collaboration, to achieving what we're capable of doing collectively, is trust. I like to point out that without trust, we don't really collaborate. Without trust, we might merely coordinate. Now, there's nothing wrong with coordination. Coordination is a good thing, a positive thing, but our performance is nowhere near our potential. We're just kind of doing what we need to do, but it's not innovative, not creative. If we increase the trust, we can move to a higher level, move from coordination to maybe cooperation. That's better. More give and take, a little bit more two-way. Increase the trust even more. You can move from cooperation to collaboration, to creative collaboration, to innovative collaboration, to high trust collaboration. But it is trust that turns mere coordination into true collaboration, where we might get synergy, where 1 + 1 might equal 3 or 10 or 100. But we need trust to boost us, to drive us, to multiply us, to get there. And without that, we're more probably in the realm of coordination or at best cooperation. Not bad, but nowhere near our potential.
That's so good. And thinking about those three C's: coordination, cooperation, and collaboration, I think it's easy to assume that we are collaborating when we're working interpersonally with other people in the midst of change. So I think it's such an important reminder to consider. We have to move beyond just merely telling someone to do something or navigating through change in a very simple X to Y way, but to actually work together to reach collaboration. That's so powerful.
Yeah, and I especially find it's true. You're exactly right. Because people might feel like, hey, we're working together and it's going fine. But again, if they don't truly trust each other, they might not be vulnerable, be open, take that risk, put out what they really think. And where maybe there's differences that could create innovation and possibilities, but without trust, they're afraid to do it. So they might go along with, and we're saying what needs to be said, but not really taking that risk and putting out what might be a game changer if they're not quite sure if they can trust the person. So again, nothing wrong with coordination, and cooperation is a little bit better, but real collaboration implies a real interactive dynamic of taking risk and being authentic and real and open with each other, vulnerable. That requires trust.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's funny when you think about just the current state of the business climate and what's going on in today's world, considering that multiple studies year after year are sharing that between 70 to 90% of mergers, acquisitions, all these changes that are happening often fail. And they might just be trying to coordinate for all we know, right? And a lot of times the heart of that is clashes between culture and people. So thinking about, I know in a lot of your work, you've spoken to the need to drive collaboration through trust. And you said something that was really profound as I was preparing for this conversation. I was thinking about your statement that low trust will almost always derail an otherwise good strategy. So, do you believe that managers can effectively implement change without trust? And if not, what is the trust tax or the cost of actually neglecting trust?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so that statement is kind of I was trying to make the point when I made the statement that look, there's more to do than just have trust. And I said, look, high trust won't necessarily rescue a lousy strategy, but low trust will almost always derail a good one. And so here's the point that we might have a great strategy, and in theory we might have great ability to implement, to execute the strategy. But if there's distrust on the team, in the culture, even though we have a great plan, a great merger coming together, with all these great ideas of the innovation, the synergy that we can create, but if we don't trust each other, the impact of that merger, achieving those outcomes, is going to be taxed. It's going to be diminished, diluted. We're not going to achieve it. And because low trust truly is a tax of everything. And so here's one way of thinking about it. Let's say we take any change initiative and have this initiative take place in two organizations that are identical in every way but one. They're identical. They're in the same industry, the same size organization. They're taking on the same challenges. They have the same issue. The only thing that's different is one is a high trust culture and one is a low trust culture. Otherwise, they're identical in every respect. If you take those initiatives and play them out, lead the change in those two organizations that are otherwise identical in every respect but culture. And I'll tell you what, in the high trust culture, here's what you're going to see. Well, actually, let me go low trust culture first. In the low trust culture, here's what you're going to see. Everything will take you longer to do as you try to implement the change. Everything will cost you more to do. People will be questioning, wondering, what's the agenda? What's the motive? What's going on here? And they'll be second guessing. They'll be finger pointing. They'll be fearful of the future. You'll be diluted, diminished in the outcome of the change. You'll have less involvement, less commitment, less energy, less joy. And when you get to the end of the initiative, it won't be what you thought it was going to be, because it will be diluted, diminished, taxed all along the way, having cost more and having taken you longer to get there, with exhausting the people and the culture. By contrast, take that same change initiative in an otherwise similar organization, the difference here being high trust. Your ability to achieve it faster has gone up. Nothing is as fast as the speed of trust. At less cost, with greater involvement, greater commitment, greater energy, greater joy from the people, with a far greater outcome, and also more agility, more excitement, passion, commitment of the people. And the only difference was the level of trust. And so, look, you still have to do all the other things involved in leading a change initiative. But when you start with trust, it's like you have massive tailwinds behind you that are accelerating and multiplying your change initiative. When you start with distrust, you have massive headwinds in front of you that are diminishing, diluting, taxing every step of the way.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's important to consider the speed and the cost, exactly as you were describing, of trust. And for those leaders that are thinking about, you know what? I'm actually in a low trust culture right now. Based on what Stephen's sharing, I don't know if I'm in a position where I might end up being one of those organizations that doesn't execute this change well because of the current environment. So considering those individuals that may be thinking about, well, what behaviors can I use or implement or own in order to be more effective at fostering collaboration to change my environment from a low trust environment to what you're describing as that high trust environment, what would you tell them?
I would say that you've identified the right thing. We've got to focus on building that trust in order to achieve the potential of the change and the real greatest impact of the change. So I'll give you a little example of this if I could.
Yeah.
Worked with, had permission to share this, worked with at the time when IBM and Lenovo merged. This was the IBM ThinkPad when it was sold to Lenovo. And they'd been at this a year and a half already, but they were not achieving kind of the synergy and the potential of the merger. And it was seen that, gosh, we've got great technology, we've got great research, we've got great channels, we've got great people, but we're not achieving what we thought we were going to achieve yet. They'd been at it for a year and a half. They finally realized that they needed to build more trust right with each other at the very top, because these were two completely different companies coming together, different cultures. They literally spoke different languages. One was based in Beijing, China. The other was out of North Carolina. They needed to learn to work together, trust each other. So they came together and they said, look, to achieve the real outcome that we're wanting and why we did this merger in the first place, we've got to build more trust with each other. So we spent a couple of days with them working on giving them tools, a language, a framework of trust, a process of how to build trust on purpose intentionally. They did this. They took this. They embraced it. They applied it. They implemented it. They began to build truly a high trust team and a high trust culture right at the very top. This was the top 24 people, the executive team. When they built that trust first with that team, they then were able to build the trust with the teams that emanated from that top team and down within those organizations. It's hard to build trust with the subsequent organizations if the top team doesn't trust each other. But you have trust at the top. You can now extend that trust, expand it. They began to build trust. And they built a far greater level of trust and a culture of trust starting at the top, expanding it. And then they began to do everything else better. And they achieved really the goals and the objectives of the merger. But they had to have that kind of that reset point of where they're saying, look, the focus here is not whether this was a good idea to merge. It was to achieve the real value of this, we need to build trust to do everything else. And so they intentionally focused on it. And they did it. It's a great tribute to them and their success. And they call this the Lenovo way. But it started with trust at the very beginning.
I love that. I love that. And the importance of taking that ownership at the most senior level, right? Starting with the senior leadership team, really having them determine, why are we navigating through this change? How can trust help us be more efficient throughout this change, and then cascading down throughout the rest of the organization as well. And for those that are maybe in a position where they don't have the opportunity where they're listening to right now, they might not have visibility to that conversation at the most senior level, but they know that this needs to happen and they want to change their individual behavior as well. Are there any trust behaviors that they should consider when they maybe have had a challenging interaction with a teammate as they're navigating through a specific change to really foster that collaboration?
Yes. Let me highlight three key behaviors from the Speed of Trust 13 behaviors to work on. The first is to listen first. Listen first, to really have empathy and understanding. And so often on change initiatives, our focus is on, to use Kurt Lewin's force field analysis, the focus is on the driving forces, all the logical, practical things we need to do to drive the change. And that's important. But again, there are restraining forces that are holding it back. And the driving forces are logical. The restraining forces are often psychological and they're emotional. So the key to move those, to change those, to transform restraining forces into driving forces is empathy. It's understanding. And when people feel understood, they can now become, they're far more open to be influenced by you and to maybe actually see the world differently because they first feel like you understood them. So listen first. Demonstrate empathy is powerful to actually leading change. It's almost paradoxical. But, with people, fast is slow, slow is fast. So go slow and understand, and you'll move faster later. Second, I would focus on creating transparency during times of change. We want to be open, transparent, no hidden agenda. It's an open agenda. So tell them what you can. And when you can't, tell them that you can't, but that you will when you can. Be as transparent as you can. And you show that vulnerability even. Vulnerability, transparency builds trust. And we need that, especially during times of change. And you're also acknowledging you don't know everything, but you're as vulnerable, as open as you can. And you tell them what you can, when you can. And when you can't, you tell them that you can't. Third, more than ever, we need to extend trust during times of change. We've got to be trusting. We have to be willing to give that trust. There's a risk to do it. I know that. You know that. But there's a risk not to do it. And I think the risk of not extending trust during times of change is greater than the risk of doing it. So be smart about it, but find ways to extend trust, to lead out and extending trust to others during times of change. They'll receive the trust. They'll be inspired by it. They'll do better because of it. They'll grow, but they'll also return it. They'll reciprocate. They'll give it back to you. And, the best way to get trust is to give trust. So you got to give it to get it, especially during times of change. So those are 3 great trust behaviors that will accelerate the building of trust during change.
Yes, yes. Those for those that are taking notes, just to recap, right? We're thinking about how we can intentionally listen first in every interaction with our team. Stephen shared creating transparency, making sure that we are considering that vulnerability and that openness helps establish and build and restore that trust, and then extending trust. And Stephen, I think extending trust is often one of the hardest in the midst of change, because we as leaders want to make sure that change happens as we expect. So it's easy to want to control everything that's happening, even people's emotional reactions to that change as well. Is there any advice you would give to a leader to help to ensure that their actions align with their words as they're trying to continue to build trust with their teams? I mean, you gave these great examples of those behaviors. Any other pieces of advice that you would share as someone's just considering, okay, I need to build this into my day-to-day, how I'm showing up for my team as we collaborate through this change?
Yes, I would say this, that in addition to extending that trust, being trusting, we also need to demonstrate that we ourselves are trustworthy, that we're not only trusting, we're trustworthy, and that we are going first. We're modeling the behavior that we would like to see. And so if we want to see more respect, we're the first to show respect. If we want to see more openness, more of that transparency, we're the first to be open and transparent and vulnerable. Someone needs to go first. Leaders go first. So we model that. And then we really also are trying to model that we're a person that they can trust. Because, the whole idea during times of change especially is if people learn that we'll always talk truthfully, tell them the truth, they might not like what they hear. It might be disruptive. It might be different than what they wanted. But over time they'll learn, I might not like what I'm hearing, but I've learned that I can trust what I hear, even if I don't like it. And that they're authentic, they're real, they're a person of integrity. And they also, we do what we say we're going to do. So we say, look, here's the situation, and here's what we're going to do about it. And then, I do what I say I'm going to do. So I declare my intent. I tell them what I'm going to do. I do what I say I'm going to do. That builds trust, and it builds fast. It builds it fast, exceptionally fast. Now, look, if I always deliver, always come through with what I said, I'll build trust, but I'll build it faster, especially during times of change, if up front I declare my intent that, look, we're trying to achieve this change in a way that builds trust. And then I tell them what I'm going to do. So here's what you can expect of me. If I make you a commitment, I'm going to keep it, or else I won't make one. If I'm going to communicate, I'm going to talk truthfully. I'm not going to spin or twist or manipulate. I'm going to be open. I'm going to be transparent. And I'm going to tell you what I can. If I can't, I'm going to tell you that I can't, but that I will when I can, and so forth. And so now I've told them what to look for. I call that signaling your behavior. That way they're looking for it, like on the freeway, if someone signals, turn on the blinker. They're not doing that for themselves. They're doing that for others, so they might anticipate what to look for. That way they're more aware of it. They're looking for it. Then, when I do what I said I was going to do, I keep the commitment. I talk truthfully. I'm open and I'm transparent. I deliver the outcome, the result. They credit me more with it because they were looking for it. And I build trust faster than had I not done those things in advance. And so it's a really powerful way to accelerate trust during times of change. Declare your intent, signal your behavior, that is, tell them what you're going to do, and most importantly, do what you just said you were going to do. And they learn that your word is your bond, you're a person of real integrity and authenticity, and they can trust you. And that's indispensable during times of change. So we want to be both trustworthy by who we are and trusting by how we lead.
I'm just going to sit with that for a moment, Stephen. As I was just reflecting and thinking about how powerful it is to just be able to practically apply everything you shared by declaring our intent and really becoming trustworthy leaders, I think it's important just to think about everything you've shared in this conversation, right? Starting at the highest level, how do we consider the differences in moving from coordination to cooperation to actually collaboration? How do we make sure that we're able to build a high trust environment in the midst of so many changes? And then these practical items to declare your intent, tell them what to do, signal that behavior, and then watch your team be empowered with the freedom to be able to connect and collaborate in those meaningful ways. Thank you, Stephen, so much just for your time, for your insights. I'm excited. We're going to have you back because I know we could continue to go on this conversation. But just, Stephen, thank you again for your time.
Absolutely, AJ. It's always fabulous to be with you. And I appreciate your questions and your insight.
And for anyone who'd like to learn more on this topic, you can actually download our free guide, How to Build Trust and Unleash the Potential of Your Direct Reports. You'll find the link here in the show notes, or you can visit FranklinCovey.com for more information and resources. Thank you again for listening and engaging in this enriching conversation. And until next time, Dr. AJ Lee, we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.